right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back with more about the NCAA controversy in 2025, and this is the talk of the town. West Virginia, North Carolina, last teams into the tournament, last team out, first team out of the tournament. What is the deal, and why is everybody talking about quadrants? I'm going to pull back the curtain, and we're going to jump into it. For those of you who aren't familiar with it and don't know why you got in here in the first place, the NCAA tournament bracket was announced on Sunday. And a part of that ritual is that we tell everybody who the last four teams in the tournament were. They said, good job, Texas, Xavier, San Diego State, and North Carolina. You got in by the skin of your teeth, and you get the right to play your way into the tournament as teams 65 through 68. However, because we want to make sure that somebody can feel slighted and disenfranchised by this, we're going to tell you who the first four teams that got left out of the tournament were. And that's West Virginia, Indiana, Ohio State, and Boise State. So naturally, we have issues now because North Carolina last team in, West Virginia first team out. Why did they beat us? Why didn't they beat us? Who's better than who and why? It's a big deal, and everybody's talking about it. Who's talking about it, you might ask? Well, Governor of West Virginia holds a press conference. He says they're corrupt. He says they've cheated. He says they've been screwed, and they're going to file a lawsuit. All the talking heads, Fox, ESPN, everybody wants to say that this is ridiculous. Nobody had North Carolina in the tournament. Everybody had West Virginia in the tournament, and it all comes down to their quadrants. What is a quadrant, you might ask? Well, the quadrant system was started when we switched over to net rankings, and it is used to compare teams on a basis of where their games were played, against whom, and what the results were. So quadrant one, you have to, if you're playing a home game and you play somebody whose net ranking is 1 through 30, that is a quadrant one game. If you are on a neutral court and your opponent's a 1 through 50, that is a quadrant one game. If you're on an away court and your opponent is a 1 through 75, that is a quadrant one game. As you get a more difficult environment, a neutral site or away from home, the depth of teams that you can play to score in quadrant one is higher. So you can see here on the chart, quadrant two, home games go through rank 75. Quadrant 3, home games go through rank 160, and then Quadrant 4 finishes out the entire ranking system of 353 Division I men's basketball teams. Same thing goes progressively down through neutral and away sites. So let's take a flip back over here and talk about our two teams in question, Carolina and West Virginia. In Quadrant 1, Carolina went 1-12. West Virginia, though, went 6-10. Checking out Quadrant 2, Carolina is a whopping 8-0 against Quadrant 2 opponents, while West Virginia falters in Quadrant 2 with a 4-3 record. Dropping down into Quadrant 3, Carolina picks up a loss at 7-1, but West Virginia remains undefeated against inferior opponents in Quadrant 3 at 4-0. And then at the bottom of the barrel, Quadrant 4 opponents, teams that are largely ranked in the bottom half of the NCAA, both Carolina and West Virginia finish off with perfect records, 6-0 and 5-0 respectively. Where does this leave us, or why does it even matter? Let's talk more about net systems. So, Bill Cohen, at the time a member of the NABC's ad hoc committee, explained to us that RPI, which went out the window in 2018, was a helpful tool, but we needed to find something to do better, and we needed to more narrowly define quality wins. The intention of putting this system in place was so that we could clearly identify which teams had more quality wins. But the NCAA, in their most recent publications on the subject, reference a couple of things, and notably they talk about losses. So it's not just about who you beat, but it's who you're losing to that seems to matter to the NCAA, and they say that Q3 and 4 losses could be incredibly important when it comes to tournament selection and seeding. So let's talk about the quadrants for our two target teams, Carolina and West Virginia. North Carolina has Quadrant 1 losses to Auburn, Pitt, Clemson, Wake Forest, Michigan State, Duke, 3 times I might add, Florida, Kansas, Louisville, and Alabama, where West Virginia picks up Quadrant 1 losses to Pitt, Baylor, Kansas State, Texas Tech, Houston, Arizona, BYU twice, Houston twice, and to Louisville. There were no Quadrant 2 losses for Carolina, but there are Quadrant 2 losses for West Virginia. That comes with TCU, Arizona State, and Colorado. This, I think, is going to be important because as we drop to the bottom half, we see that Carolina has the only Q3 or 4 loss. They lose to Stanford. Wah, wah, wah. But what does this all mean? Let's check out their common opponents. Do they have something that can set them apart? Their records, they got the same number of losses overall. Carolina seems to have played more games. There's a lot of different reasons for that, probably mostly because Carolina won in their conference tournament and West Virginia did not. But let's take a peek here. Common opponents. We've got Pitt, Louisville, and Kansas played by both teams. Carolina played them on the road and lost. West Virginia played them on the road and won. Louisville, Carolina plays on the road and loses, also going in against Louisville, but doing it at home and losing at home, West Virginia. Pitt, Carolina had the privilege of playing twice. They split home and away, and on the road, West Virginia picks up a tough loss at Pitt. What does this mean? Again, the number of Quadrant 1 wins and the Quadrant 3 and 4 losses are incredibly important for seeding. So, back to our seeding, our records numbers here for these two teams. We've got Quadrant 1. We've got 1 win versus 6 wins in Quadrant 1. But doesn't seem to matter because what I think they're looking at here are losses in the lower quadrants. And West Virginia picked up 3 of them. That means West Virginia loses to teams they shouldn't lose to. What I think a Quadrant 1 win means is that you beat teams that you are either equal with or that you might lose to. But a Quadrant 2, 3, or 4 loss is a game you should have won. And in this situation, what we see is that having more Q1 losses outweighs the number of wins that you could possibly have. So back to the final setup here for the bracket. Carolina slides in. They come in the last team in. West Virginia gets left out. Everybody's disappointed in West Virginia. Nobody's disappointed in North Carolina except for the Duke fans. And they're just getting ready for crying later in the season, in the tournament, I mean. But if you're interested to learn more about how this works, how the selection works, hit the subscribe button. Check us out on our next video. Thanks for listening today, and we will catch you next time.